everybody, and welcome to Rabbit Hole Productions' finals presentation. So this is our team, and our faculty advisors are Chris Klug and Ricardo Washington. So what we actually ended up creating was a pre-production package for an ARPG PC game with a playtime that we estimate will be between 40 and 60 hours, and it's meant for people who enjoy ARPGs or the steampunk aesthetic in games. Particularly, we're focusing on young adults. So what is the deliverable? It will be that pre-production package that will include game design docs, a concept art book, a trailer video, a pitch deck, and the logistic documents such as budget. So this is our metrics matrix. We focus mostly on storytelling, gameplay, and the art. So as far as our design process goes, we started with brainstorming, and then we would do research before entering an iterative cycle, which the most important part is that we would start with a narrative idea, then create a mechanic based off of this before using those mechanics to detail that narrative. As far as major iterations over the semester, we started with the idea of deities in a steampunk world because we thought this was very unique. But before halves, there really wasn't any connect. So at halves, we tried to connect them by having the deities be the reason why there is science in the world. They're the ones who created revelations and gave them to humans, thus creating steampunk. And for between halves and finals, we focused on trying to make one of the main characters, a deity named Tima, more important to the story. So that's what we ended up focusing on for the final half, is making the gods more prevalent to the narrative itself rather than just the world. So as far as feedback that we've gotten, at Playtest Day, we had some good feedback. People understood and were excited with what we were presenting. But there was an issue with our combat. Nobody really understood it, mostly because we didn't have visuals at this point in time. So we changed that for softs, and we no longer had that issue where people were confused about our combat and things like that, because we had a physical version of what we were trying to say. So instead, people didn't have confusion, they just wanted more information on things we hadn't touched on. And the issues came from the pacing of our trailer, as well as from issues with our logistics, particularly with budget. So what is the hook of our game? For the narrative side, it's the idea that these mythic deity beings created this world of science, and we thought that this was a really compelling way to do the narrative. As far as mechanics, having the combination of a multi-tool steampunk with elemental abilities and summoning deities creates a very unique and customizable playing experience for the player. So without further ado, I will show the trailer and then move on to Hagen and Shirley to talk about narrative.
Listen well, young human. No matter your reasoning for being here, your entrance to my temple was not fortuitous. While I enjoy the feeling of freedom once again, you must understand that I sealed myself for a reason. There was an ancient evil sealed here. You've surely seen the ruins of what used to be the pinnacle of mortal society. All brought to its knees by a single corrupted deity, Orwin, the deity of catastrophe. In order to protect you mortals, I sealed myself away to be stuck in eternal combat with the beast. But now they are free, and the world is once more in grave danger. Come, mortal. As you are the one who broke the seal, you are needed to seal them away again. Free the elemental deities that Orwin trapped so long ago. They will give you aid and strength needed to face the deity of catastrophe. You will need to keep your mind sharp and your blade sharper. But don't worry too much, for time is on your side.
Rabbit Hole Productions presents the pre-production package for release, The Gears of Time. In the game, you play as a young archaeologist of a steampunk society who accidentally releases an evil deity from its imprisonment. Now you must work to reseal it before it destroys humanity. In order to gain the power you need, unseal the remaining 5 deities of the elements to gain their aid in battle. Call upon the aid of an unsealed deity by charging the steam-powered item of your own invention. To do so, use multiform weapons that you can craft to attack monsters in order to grow your strength. Discover blueprints among the surface to construct better gear and weapons based off of ancient technology. Solve the mysteries left behind in the form of ancient puzzles. Talk to NPCs to gain their insight into mysterious locking mechanisms. Push, pull, and grapple the environment to grant you entry into the inner sanctums of the divine temples. Once fully powered, face off against the deity of catastrophes and seal it away for good. It's Arcane's Piltover's steampunk meets Avatar The Last Airbender's elemental augmentations, all in a Legend of Zelda open world.
Thank you, Caitlin. So, kind to the narrative, what is our games about? So, you play as a young archaeologist in a steampunk society, and one day you accidentally release the catastrophe deity that will destroy the world, and now you have to seal it back to save humanity. So, who you are in the game? You play as the characters on the left side is Cyrus, and the right side is Sierra. This is the characters you can choose in the beginning of the game to play, and your identity is a archaeologist. You're also the adventurer. You're the ender of the catastrophe, and also the savior of the world. And this is the overview of the characters.
The reigning deities of the ancient society were time and nature. However, with the overconsumption of resources by humans, nature became corrupted, trying to wipe out humanity. It sealed away the elemental deities, trying to siphon their divine power. However, before they could deal the killing blow to humanity, Tima stepped in, sealing herself and Arwen away and creating the Isles to preserve humanity. However, when you unseal Tima, you also unseal Arwen. Therefore, Tima then joins you to unseal the other elemental deities to have a chance of fighting back. The elemental deities follow the 5 classic elemental structures, air, water, earth, fire, and light. These were trapped and weakened by Arwen, the deity of catastrophes. And when you free them, you create a pact with you, allowing you to use their elemental abilities and allow you to summon them in combat, a more contractual friendship.
So there are 2 major parts that construct the world. One is the floating isles and also the surface under it. On the floating isles, this is where most of the human lives currently, and they rediscover science after the end of deities. Also on the surface, there are the remnants of ancient deities, and that leads to the birth of science. So on the floating isles, there are 5 major parts: the commercial part, farming, science, religious, and military parts that's on the island. And this is where most of the human NPC lives, and you can get quests from them. And on the surfaces, there are 7 temples that you need to go through and release different deities to help you save the world at the end when you face catastrophe deities.
The main stakes of the game is that each time you unseal an elemental deity, Tima loses a little bit of her lifespan to break that seal. So by the time that you've unsealed all of them, Tima has to use a little bit of her lifespan and then eventually die in order to give you the power you need in order to beat Arwen at the very end of the game. So once you have unsealed all of the elemental deities and have the power of Tima as well, you're able to fight off against Arwen and win the day. I'll pass it off to Heije and Nelson to talk about mechanics.
So this is how our game systems work with each other. So there are 4 main parts that is exciting: the crafting system, the solving puzzles, the combat with the multiform weapons, and the combat with the elemental abilities you gain from those deities. In order to beat the evil deity to save the world, you need to gain power by our crafting systems to discover the blueprints and craft the new forms of your weapon, and craft the offerings to the deities that you made contract with to unlock your skill tree further. The combination of these 2 will enable players different play styles, and we can also use the crafting systems to craft the tools that can help you in solving puzzles. Solving puzzles is the key of the solving temples when you want to meet with those deities. The overall progression over game is that you discover a deity's temple, find a way to unlock it, solve it, and make the contract with the new deities. Then you will need to beat enemies, collecting materials to craft offerings, raise your deity level, which means unlock your ability further. You will do this 5 times, since there are 5 elemental deities, and 2 times with the deity of time and the evil deity at the end. The crafting system has a similar loop. You will unlock the new blueprint along with the new deity power in the temple that you can craft and try the new tools, new weapon forms, and the new skills. And these are examples of what you can craft. The first one is the skills tree of the 5 elemental deities, and the second one is the different forms of a single weapons. The third is the grappling hooks that will not only help you solve the puzzles, but also move around through this steampunk setting world. And Nelson and I will talk about the example stage, the water temple. Since we don't have 3D artists in our teams, these are models that online to represent one of our mob, the excavator. And when you discover a temple with the elemental deities, you will encounter mobs at the entrance of the temples. After you defeat them, you will need to be able to enter the temples.
And once you enter the temple, you will face a series of puzzles, and completing the puzzle room will lead you to the entrance of the next one. And all of these puzzles will have mechanics related to the corresponding elemental theme of the temple. So the example we're showing here is the water temple, so you can see mechanics related to water in all of these puzzles. And after you completed these puzzles, you will be led to the next room, which is the main chamber. And the area to unseal the deity is located on the other side of the corridor. The player will walk towards the water orb and trigger a cutscene that unseals the deity. Then the water orb will break, and the player will observe all its power, and the screen will show up to show you what abilities you just gained from unsealing that deity. Entering the next room is going to be a boss fight. And during this fight, you will be prompted to use the new ability you just gained from unsealing that deity. So the fight also serves as an opportunity to try out the new skill you just gained. Now I'll pass it off to Danny to talk about the elemental powers and logistics.
Yes, so after you win the boss fight in the deity temple, you can use their power for future combat. And the power you can use is based on the time you charge on the elemental power collector. The longer you charge, the more powerful skills you can be used. And if you fully charge the collector, you can use and release and manifest the deity to help you for a short amount of time. And here's our timeline. So since we're targeting 40 to 60-hour gameplay experience, we're thinking about 5-year game production period. We're in the first half of our game pre-production, and we're working on our first playable prototype. And we're also targeting to have our first early access game version at month 30. And looking back the entire semester, we start to pop out a lot of different contents and ideas for this world. So sometimes we need to spend extra time on thinking about the narrative reasons behind these design decisions. And because of the scope of our game, we make a variety of different concept and art, and also create art only for our trailers and storyboard. And we start to work separately and try to be very productive from the first half of the semester, but after half, we set up our art and design update every week, and we believe that this helps us to create a more cohesive world. And for our documentation, we found out that having more visuals is more important to have very detailed explanation to convey our design ideas. And that's all we have for today. We're now open to questions.
There seems to be a lot of power. There seems to be a lot of power in this if I care about Tima, and I have a conflicted feeling about sacrificing a bit of Tima each time I progress through this. What are you doing to make me care about that character and about maybe giving some tension about sacrificing?
Yeah, so Tima acts as not only like a Navi character, but as like a companion who guides you, but she also slowly becomes your friend over the course of the game. It's worked into the narrative that you two slowly become closer to each other and learn to trust each other and depend on one another. So at the end, it is like you're trying to save the world, you have to give up your best friend at that point, so. Yes?
So what happens now after
As of now, we do not have any intentions of moving forward with this other than having the pitch, but it is at a point where technically we could continue pre-production and potentially pitch it in the future if we all wanted to do something like that or one of us wanted to, but as of now, it's just going to be archived. Yes.
So pre-production is kind of a weird project structure, and I'm kind of curious if you found techniques over the semester that were effective in like iterating the project and the ideas, and like sort of like what advice would you give to another team doing pre-production in that space?
I guess I'm going to answer it again. Okay, so, but one of the main things that I think that we learned as far as like techniques is to have constant conversation. Because at first we weren't really talking to each other, particularly the design was not talking to the art other than like once a week we'd kind of like let people know what we were doing, and that kind of affected our iteration process. There was stuff being designed and stuff being made like art-wise that weren't quite connecting. So as far as iterating, once we started working together and talking to each other more often, it became more cohesive. So my suggestion would be talk early and soon and often.
Just to add on that, we were also talking like within our own like specialized areas. Like art would talk to only art, and design would talk to only design. And while we knew what each other were doing, we didn't always know what they were doing, and they didn't always know what we were doing. And so making sure that it's not just compartmentalized and departmentalized also is very helpful.
Yes, of all your design decisions, what would you want to prove first? You know, what does success hinge on the most that maybe is least likely to be true?
I think we'd argue that it's probably some of our like summoning mechanics and like our combat mechanics in general, and just that overall game loop that we showed of like how our systems work together. But particularly, people have shown a lot of interest over the entire semester about summoning the deity, and if that doesn't quite hit home as exciting once we actually create it, it's going to kind of flop. All right, thank you.
Hello, we're Team Nautilus, and we created a VR transformational experience for Games for Change, which we are planning to present this summer at the Games for Change Festival. When we met with our client, they asked us to focus on creating a game that would address one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And we chose to focus on life on land with the main focus of light pollution and how it affects bird migration.
Yeah, and here is our metric of success, which is the transformational content accuracy, research, and playtesting. And based on that, we decide our overall transformational goal, which is we want our guests to know the light pollution is disrupt the bird migration, and the light pollution is actually a problem that needs to be addressed. And also, we want them to feel motivated to make some change. And then we will show you a short video to give you guys an overview of our VR experience.
So starting with the game, the player will be able to lean left and right by spreading up their arms. And we will make the player try to keep following up with the flocks. And when they are approaching with the light source, they will be blind and be pulled to the light source to indicating the light is dangerous. And when the player fly into the downtown area, they were able to experience a lot of obstacles. The player will have to lean up and down, left and right to avoid those light boards. And at the end of the game, the player will be trapped in a huge light beam where all the birds have no choice to escape. So through the trailer, we can see we have 4 key moments. The first one is Mount Washington, and the second one is the Point State Park, and the third one is the downtown area of Pittsburgh, and the fourth one is the huge spotlight. And we will share our design and iteration process for each key moments. The first one is the Mount Washington. So it's the start of the game, and we want the player to feel a little bit peace and ease. And we want to teach the player about the controls, and we want the player to see what happens when there's no light pollution happening, and they will be able to see the beautiful Milky Way. And with the gameplay goal, we want to immerse the player with the bird perspective. And for the transformational goal, we want to educate the player about how birds migrate at night, and how the player can feel about how the sky looks like. And for the emotional curve here, we want to simulate a sense of peaceful and ease.
To make the game more immersive, we first designed a control that is really intuitive. The player will just open the arms and lean left and right to control the bird to fly left and right. However, we get most of the feedback from the p-test that this control is not immersive enough. And since we only let the player to fly left and right, there's a big lack of the freedom. That brings us to the second version of the control, where we try to add the flapping mechanism. The player will just open the arm and do the flapping with the arms. With this control, the player can easily go fast or slow as they want. We grant a lot of freedom to them, but it is really unpredictable as we don't know how fast they will fly through the experience. And at the moment, if we want to integrate this flapping mechanism with our left and right control, it is really out of the scope. That brings us to the final version of our control, where we keep the leaning left and right as before, and we also adding the up and down mechanism that player can just look up and look down to control the direction. With this control, the player can go any direction they want, and it is really immersive. And since we only limit the player in a certain space, it is more predictable. And most playtesters intuitively know how to use the control at first.
Okay, except besides the control system, the bird flock system is also introduced in this moment, which is the bird flock system. The reason why is the bird is actually migrate in bird flocks at night. So here comes our initial design. In our initial design, we wanted to keep it simple. So which is we want the bird flock first have a strong guidance to guide the players to flying through the migration path at night. And second, we wanted to be the bird flock is a symbol. We don't want it to be a more specific one types of bird. So in our initial design, we make the bird to be glowing and blue to make it obvious in the game scene. And we play test it. What went well is, yeah, most of the play testers said it's a strong guidance. They really know where to go. But what went wrong is, yeah, the bird is so unrealistic. Many players says about, okay, it looks like not a bird in an actual world. So we iterated, and we come to the 2.0. In 2.0, we changed the color palette of the birds. We're choosing a more general songbird color pattern in the real world, and we change it from glowing and blue into the yellow and brown. And we also wanted to keep the idea of, we still wanted to give the player a strong guidance through the whole game. So we're adding a Blu-ray trial to flying along with the bird flock. So what was going well is, yeah, there's no playtest that says about unrealistic about the birds, but it seems that the problem is shifting from the birds to the blue trail. Yeah, many players says they don't have any idea of what the blue trails are. The blue trails made them subtract from the games. And also they're feeling like they are always behind, far behind the bird flock. And playtesters wanted to really be part of the bird flock. So for those reasons, we come up with our finalized version of the bird flock system, which is different from previous two. We're adding a accompaniment system, which means there will be a certain number of birds who are always accompanied with the player. And who are always flying along with the player to make a stronger connections with the player itself and the migrations. And also we changed the shining Blu-ray into a more transparent and white to make this a sense of the wing flow, and this wing flow will always serve as a weak guidance.
And here's come to how we made the change for the lights. After the playtest with our SMEs, we got the feedback that our lighting condition in the city is not look like the real world. So we kind of increased the light scattering to make it more feel like the huge, powerful light source in the city, and to indicate that the light pollution happening in the night. And we also made the Milky Way shift a little bit when you are approaching to the city. So it actually shows that when there are so many powerful artificial lights happening, the sky will fade into black, and you will not be able to spot all those stars and Milky Ways. And here's come to our second key moment. It's the Point State Park. Here we are introducing the first danger in the game, and we want the player to really feel the frustration from attracting by the lights. The gameplay goal is to introduce some danger in the game, and we want to for the transformation goal, we want to educate the player about how the bird will feel and and what will happen if the bird's getting attracted by the light source. And for the emotional goal here, we want to simulate the tension and frustration.
To make the light feels more dangerous, we first make the light to have strong impact to the player. The player will be pulled towards the center of the light, and their eye will be all blocked by the white effect. But most playtesters didn't know what really happened. They cannot make the connection between the white effect and the light. And then we add the arrow to the screen to indicating where the player is flying. But this arrow is still really confusing, as most players don't know is this arrow a guidance or an indicator? And that brings us to this final version of our light attraction system, where we are weakening the light effect, the white effect, and also weakening the pulling effect from the light, so the player can easily make the connection between the light.
And here's come to our third key moments. It's a downtown Pittsburgh. Here we want to really introduce some more dangers. So we made the player fly across the area with a lot of billboards, and we want to, and for the gameplay goal is to twist and reform the obstacles and dangers in the game to create a more fresh experience. And for the educational goal, we try to educate the player about how the birds will collide to the buildings and billboards due to the different bad light source. And for the emotional goal here, we want to keep adding up those tension and frustrations for our final scene.
For this downtown area, the feedback we got from our subject matter expert Diane is that this part of light is too warm and not scattering enough. So what we did is we make the color tone of the light much cooler and make the light stronger. So when you fly to this area now, you will feel really distracting. And also for the billboard part, we found that the text content on this part is really distracting. So we blurred the text content and make it more generic. And also we found that when you crash into the building or the billboard, there is not a strong feedback for the collision mechanic. So what we improve is we add a bleed visual effect in this part to make it stronger.
And here's come to our final key moments is the spotlight. Here is where the game ends, and we wanted the player to be trapped in the spotlight. We got this idea from real-world examples, and we will talk about that later. And this is the end game part, so we want to end the game in a really emotional moment, and we try to educate the player about how birds can be trapped in the spotlights. And here we want to we try to build up the emotion of desperation.
From our playtest, we found that the players weren't really understanding the end scene with the spotlight. So we increased the lighting to make it brighter, to make it really seem like a spotlight. And also we had the player stay in the scene a little bit longer to see what it feels like to be circling with the other birds. And then for our end scene, we also connected that with a real world example, like Kai said. We got this actual footage from Cornell, a real life example of what's happening in New York City with the birds circling in the spotlight. And then we also related to what's happening with that this is a major issue and like how many birds this affects per year, and also showing pictures of birds that have been collected here from window collisions in downtown Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and here's all the feedback we got from our alumni playtest. They said they are disoriented and feel sad. So we think we really make our transformational goal by making them simulate the birds and get the birds feeling. And we are also invited to the World Migratory Bird Day to have another, the final test before we go to the festival. And here's our design for the Game for Change Festival. Basically, we have 3 areas: the gameplay area, and preparing area, and the information desk. Also, to make the experience more immersive, we designed 2 kinds of lighting. So the first one is before the start of game. We will ask players to take the pre-game survey, and they will enter the room with the yellowish star string lights to simulate the night sky. And then after they finish the game and take off the headset, they will see the yellow light are turned off and the blue light simulate the city are turned on. So that, and there are that body, like bird's shape, cut from bird on the ground to simulate what's happening in the game, and they will take the post-game survey. Yeah, and you are welcome to join us in New York during July for the Games for Change Festival. Okay, thank you. Questions?
So I just have a quick question. That your locations are all in Pittsburgh, right? But when you take it to New York, will that matter when you show it in New York? The people that are looking at Pittsburgh locations as opposed to New York locations?
We create the map based on Pittsburgh because first, our subject matter experts are all around Pittsburgh City, so we have more, we can get more information in detail. And also, Pittsburgh have passed a lot of laws to protect the birds migrating at night. They actually turned off the lights during a certain time frame. And that's why we're picking Pittsburgh. And when we are shifting to New York, we are actually, for the third area, third key moments is the billboards section. That experience is more familiar with the New York City people because there are more like billboards and light boards in New York City. And we try to bring a familiarity of the crowded city feeling to the New York people as well.
But we also chose birds because they're everywhere, and so everyone can relate to the light pollution idea with how it affects bird migration. So that's happening around the world. So we felt like this would be also a really great concept to focus on because no matter where you're coming from, this is a problem wherever.
So you guys chose to make an experience that was both depressing and uncomfortable on purpose. I think it's a great choice. Do you have any advice for teams in the future who may have to also lean into that space, how to stay true to that vision, and what are some things that they should watch out for when they're trying to work in that space?
I think for us, like completing the transformational framework at the very beginning, and so having that like a solid foundation throughout our development process, and always like referring back to that, no matter when we made iterations about should we do this or this, and then always like looking at our goals and like does that address our, are we addressing our goal with this, how we're, with our iteration. So I think like having a solid foundation really helped us.
And also something different between the traditional game design and transformational game design is like the key moment here is to really educate the people. The educational purpose serves at the first place. Then comes up with the fun part of the game. So I think by shifting the concepts at the really beginning with that mindset helps me as a level designer a lot to really design the games.
I think we can probably say that scope is a really big challenge, everything from BVW games to 14-week projects. You ended up with what seems like a very well-scoped project for the kind of experience you're trying to deliver. Can you give us some insights into how you cut it down to an experience that you feel like is short and effective?
Yeah, so like first we designed this game more like, we even consider make it to a multiplayer game. And it is a really big scope. So at first we are kind of we first build a single player game and see if it works. If we have extra time, we do this and this and that. So we have a lot of topics that is listed as if we have time, we do. And that's basically how we make it to under our scope.
And also, I think one thing important is to be familiar with what you know and what you don't know about. If we actually evaluate all the different features and tasks based on our already known knowledge, and if there are unknown problems or issues, we will do simple tasks to see how long will they take for us to crack a problem, and we can use that to evaluate and quantify the whole project.
Okay, hello everyone. We are Team Vector, and our client is Brad Vector from Acto VR, and our advisor is John Dessler. This is our team, and we are developed for this Acto 1 boot, and there are some key features for the boots. First, it avoid motion sickness, and it's more intuitive to walk in VR with the boots, and it can prevent you from bumping into obstacles. And so our project goal is to create a starter content that serves as a tutorial at the expo trade show environment at around 5 minutes. And during our development, there are some restrictions. First, there's time limit. The experience has to be around 5 minutes. And the design has to make sense of the boot weight. And third, we have to avoid adding additional motion sickness. And for our experience flow, the first phase is about basic tutorial for the boots. And the phase 2 is some simple text with the boots. And the third phase is the largest phase for the player to explore more. And so this is our trailer. And this is our first phase.
Good morning, Doctor. Please activate your suit by tapping the glowing button on the controller.
Suit activated.
Carefully step out
And this
from
is
the
our
cabin.
phase 2.
If you look down, the glowing footsteps will guide you. Try with slow, small steps, and make sure not to slide your feet. Scan the controller to turn the spaceship power on and see your mission.
Welcome on board, Doctor.
Remember, Doctor, your mission is to collect 3 samples from the planet Vector. Now step on the teleport pad to start your mission.
And this is our phase 3.
Press the trigger button of your left controller to scan the environment and see the location of samples. Good job. To collect the sample, place the right controller closer to it and hold the trigger button for 3 seconds. Perfect. It's transferred to the spaceship. Great. One more to go.
This is the ending of our trailer. And now the rest of my team will talk about how we got to this end design.
Thank you, Phoebe. So as a quick reminder, before half, we have completed the first phase and also the second phase. And for the third phase, we started to do some brainstorming, but we haven't started yet before half. And we got a great feedback from both the playtesters and also the faculties. And here are things that we did well. First one is the tutorial guide is really understandable. We designed this screen ripple animation to grab people's attention and guide people walk from the cabin to task 1 and task 2. So the same visual pattern really helps our tutorial to be understandable. And another good feedback is that our AI voiceovers is good, so it helps people to learn what to do next. The second thing we did well is that our walking route is well controlled because we designed the route as a smooth turn instead of sharp turn to help people get comfortable how to walk and turning with the boots. And also we designed a spot stop as the spot B and spot C to help people stop and relax, because most of the people will feel nervous when they first time walking with the boots. Another thing we did well is that we designed a lot of memorable moments. For example, when the cabin door is opened, and also when you power up the spaceship, it's the first time you will see the interior of the spaceship. And the third one is when you transfer yourself to the outside world. The transfer effect is really good. And we also have some problems. The first problem is that our narrative context is unclear. Most of people are unaware of they are wearing a spacesuit. And also, they are confused about the wake-up narrative. Some people even said that they thought they were passed out. And another confusion is about the controller tutorial. So there are a lot of buttons on the Vive controller. If we just tell them to press on the trigger button, they won't know which one is the trigger button. And also, we also use the same shader as the interaction of the task 1 and 2. So people tend to interact with the animation tutorial instead of just watch and learn from it. Now I will pass on to Ray to talk about how we solve these problems.
Thanks, Jingyuan. So now I'll talk about our iterations on phase 1, which is the basic tutorial part that happens in the dark cabin. Firstly, we added more animation as a visual language. For example, the wake up effect and more animated icons. We also implemented the counting down animation to create the idle time for user to just catch a breath and raise their expectations. Throughout our playtest, we found that most of people didn't know that they're wearing the mega suit. So we created the hologram suit to give them this context as well as visualize the activation status change on the suit. A crucial addition we made is the ability to reactivate the boots, intended for the situations where the touchpad is accidentally pressed again during the experience. Now move on to phase 2, where the user would do some simple tasks inside the spaceship. So once you get out of the cabin, the spaceship is where you take your initial steps. Before half, we only had a few visual cues to lead the user to the control station. But now we have added more like guiding footprints to assist user to walk step by step and also turn smoothly. This iteration has received mostly positive feedback, especially from the naive guests. And before half, we taught the user how to collect samples with the Vive controller, but through the playtest, we found that most of them just completely forget all of it after the landing on the planet. So we moved this part to the outside world to be part of the tasks, so the user can get more like positive feedback by trying those buttons. And after receiving feedbacks from faculties and playtesters, we added more like connection between the outside and inside world in the environment and also narrative. So according to our narrative, the player's mission is to collect samples in outside world for research. So we created this scientist station to emphasize that. Now I will pass it to Abby to talk about the phase 3 design.
Thank you, Ray. So as you know, our phase 3 is the outside world. So this is what the user experiences. When they land, they are met with the controller instructions, and then they have to collect all the samples. And once they're done, we show them the ending scene. So for the controller instructions, we have like two main mechanics. One is scanning the environment, which turns the user's view into a scan mode, where they can see the samples highlighted. And the second one is just collecting. So you simply hover the trigger over the sample, and it's transported. For the placement of the samples, we place the first one right in the user's eye line, so that as they're following along with the tutorial, they can test out the controls right there and then. The second one is hidden behind a rock, so that they have to use the scan mode, and as they're walking towards the sample, they can take in the environment around them. And for the third one, it's placed so that when we start the ending scene, the user gets a good view of all of that's happening. For the ending scene, we wanted to make some visual changes to the environment that the user can observe. So we do this by using a particle system of the jellyfish that surrounds the user where they're standing. The second is we grow some foliage, which ties into our narrative that the samples were actually harming the environment. And the third is just the end credits rolling over the horizon. So based on our experience from before halves, we knew that there was going to be a need for rapidly changing the layout, because as you playtest, that's where we find that how long it takes for the person to walk actually, and how is the distance. So we invested some time into building some procedural tools that would help us rapidly change that. One of them was a rock generator that would help us create long cliffs and other different kinds of rocks that we could easily change just using curves, and then a coral generator to fill in the environment. We also found this tool called Spacescape Skybox that helps create these cosmic patterns, and then we just bring it into Photoshop and edit it a bit more so as to tie it with our environment a bit more. And that's the result of all of these coming together. Yeah. So I'll pass on to MK for the soft playtest and iterations. Thank you.
Thank you. After half throughout the soft opening and the playtest day, phase 3 was the part we had the most changes. So in terms of the feedback on playtest day, we had more than 25 playtesters and 29 survey responses and 5 interviews. And on the soft opening day, we had 4 faculties. We had met 4 faculties, including our consultant. And from the client, we had weekly feedback, and we tried out the build internally more than 5 times. So based on those feedbacks, we made such choices. First, initially, we had a very small scanning pop-up screen, but we realized it is not really intuitive and it's hard to see through, because people tend to use it as a metal detector and tend to see through more of the ground. So we changed it to head-mounted view. And secondly, we found out that collecting system was not intuitive enough as well, and they had to walk really close to the samples. So we made it collectible from a distance, and we added a razor bar so they could see the range where it's collectible. Third, also the environment was not really appealing enough, so we made it more layers of depth, and we filled in with more props and plants and go along well with the narrative. And fourth, in terms of the layout as well, we tried to give some more freedom to guests so they can choose the path they could go through. However, we found out that guests usually don't want to walk further than needed, so we simplified the path and made the walking distance shorter. Also, we found out some of the guests found the task was repeated and not engaging enough, so we changed it into, we added a slight level design and made it into a better interest curve, including the rotating rock and walking across the lava river. So now Yu-chan will talk about our metrics.
Yeah, thanks, MK. So in the beginning of the semester, our team and client decided to set up 3 metrics in the project with the purpose of evaluating our success through the whole progress. So here are the 3 success metrics, and fortunately, we really did a good job satisfying these metrics. Yeah, so through playtesting, we kept editing our tutorial to make our user become more and more intuitively and naturally working in the environment. And we also adding different clear visual clues to make the seamless and non-interactive game flow. So as a result, our player were able to comfortably navigating an environment with our guidance and visual clue, resulting in a reduced learning curve. Yeah, and another metrics that we did successfully is to create an engaging and immersive moment. So our user expressed a high level of enjoyment and satisfaction after playing our game, and also with many expressing the desire to play again in the future. Yeah, so the playtesters were also highly impressed and amazed by the environment and resulting in a wow moment. Yeah. And in order to highlight the key benefit effectively reducing the motion sickness of the boots, so we designed an environment to enable players to walk freely in the world. In our playtest result, 91% of the participants reported not experiencing motion sickness while navigating through our games many turns in different terrains. So we successfully enlarged the effectiveness of the boots in reducing the discomfort in the virtual environment. Yeah, and here are some of the challenges that we use facing with the new tech. So first of all, our client worked in an evolving progress. So in the semester, our team quickly adapt to their evolving technical system, and we fast iterate from time to time. And also, since our client is constantly developing, so we need to account for the some of the hardware limitations and adjust to the existing developing prototype hardware. So moving forward, here are some recommendations for the future development. So basically, the demo contents could grow and evolve together with how the new boots are going to develop. For example, exploring more planet, exploring new path in some space, or user to walk more safe and naturally in this environment. So yeah, thanks very much, and we are now open to questions.
There was a little bit of tension in, you said you want your guests to walk comfortably, but then you said some guests didn't want to walk further. So I'm just curious, at the end when you were finished up with all your improvements, were guests walking further than when you started?
By the way, we meant they didn't want to walk further, was they wanted to go to the closest sample right away. So they don't want to walk if the sample is right here, they don't want to pass by, but just they want to collect this one first.
So it is related with walking comfortably in the boots, right?
Yeah, so the original idea was after they collect, so they would require 3 samples, but we would have additional samples at the end, just in case they want to walk more and explore more. So, but most of the guests said that once they're collected and once they're done, it's done. And a lot of that was to do with just the fatigue because of the weight of the boots, and since they've been walking like from the inside and then again walking on the outside, like 3 samples was kind of like the sweet spot of where the fatigue starts to set in, so yeah.
I'm just kind of curious if you have advice for other developers making experiences for the boots. Like, what would you have them like pay attention to and like specifically design for?
One thing would be, again, since the hardware is also, kind of changing, so one of the major things was giving them pauses in between. So walking, stopping, because again, fatigue sets in pretty quick with those. But maybe say if the new hardware that Ecto is working on is lighter, they can kind of change that. And main thing is keeping them comfortable. But I think most of the guests were really comfortable with the boot, so yeah.
And also during playtesting, sometimes we are run out of the battery, so I suggest that maybe prepare more battery during the playtest day. It will help.
I wanted to hear a little bit more about the level design of the planet. One of the things that seemed clear was with the rotating rock that you were trying to vary the ways that the user captures the crystals so it didn't feel as repetitive. Can you talk a little bit more about how you made that process seem varied even though you were doing the same thing over and over again?
So like the mechanic is still the same. You collect using the right trigger and you scan using that, but we still want to add just a little bit more to it. So again, the first one is right in front of you, as we said. So, and then the view is kind of blocked from the big rocks. So when you walk over to the second one, there comes a point where you can see the whole environment a bit better. So that was one like kind of a vista point that we tried to add. The second sample is rotating, and for the third one, they have to cross on like a narrower bridge. So it was kind of like towards the end, so we didn't have a lot of time for the level iterations, but that's what we did, yeah.
Hello, everyone. We are the last team, Kevin. So thank you for still being here to hear us presentation. Let's start. So this is our teammates, team members, and this is our clients and instructor. So the first thing is that let me introduce the Kevin to you. Kevin is a 270-degree stereoscopic multiplayer cave system. So it has lots of advantages than cave. The most important thing is that it supports multiplayer, and because it also has enormous player areas, and it's also much cheaper than cave. For example, if you need to spend $100 to build a cave, you only need to spend less than $5 to build Caven, so it's really cheap. And another thing is it's omnidirection stereoscopic, but it also has some disadvantages. For example, because we want to build a multiplayer game, so we don't use head tracking, so it will cause some problems like parallel swimming, which means the people stand in a different position to see the same object. it will have the object distortion because the camera only rendering in one position. So we want to use the ODS technique to fix this problem, but it still have some limitations. And also, we use the 3D glasses, so it will have lower resolution and the brightness. And you also need to keep distance from the screen, because if you stay too close, it will have some shadowing. So in our project, we want to use the advantages and avoid disadvantages to build our whole project. Now, just let my teammates to introduce our project to you.
Please enjoy a short trailer.
Sorry, I think that's not our final version. Just wait a minute.
Now we are going to share the entire process of our game, what our project and game is really like, what it is, and leave everyone the first impression so that the technical details can unfold later. So in the opening sequence, we present the leading page and the logo, while the broadcasting in the submarine begins to introduce the players to the background of the event and the purpose of the mission.
The expedition team, welcome. Our mission is to clean contaminated coral and find the remains of an ancient civilization. Your adventure starts
Excellent.
now.
So the goal of level 1 is for multiple players to work together to disjoin the biopolluted corals.
Use the trackers to control the laser and clean coral. Keep going.
At the end of the first level, as we pass through the stone gate, the submarine is attacked by the biorobots from the lost city ahead. And this is also the interlude and cutscene of our project.
Nice job. You have cleaned this area. Wait. The radar detected an unidentified structure ahead. Warning. Warning. The submarine is under attack. The submarine is under attack.
So in the level 2, the multiplayer interaction is slightly more complicated, with one player using the searchlight to illuminate and stop the robots, while the other two have to pilot the drone to shoot.
System rebooting in progress. Looks like we've been attacked by an unknown source. Switching to defense mode. Defend the submarine while I reboot the system. Use the searchlight to stun the enemy and use guns to eliminate them. Good D. I still need time to reboot the power system.
At the end, we will get an ending page and the credits. At the same time, the submarine broadcasts again, telling everyone that the mission has been completed and we are out of danger. At this point, the entire game experience is complete.
Well done. It seems that you have successfully protected the submarine, and our adventure is coming to an end. You are welcome to join this journey again.
Now let me talk about the process of the project, how we iterate the game. So the very initial idea is to build a fast-paced, arcade-style experience demo, and we are planning to focus more on the interaction side rather than the story side. We decided to make an underwater scene because we can lead the player's side to the moving and floating object. And this will really make the parallel swimming problems better. And on the half, we found out that we can make a fixed trail experience, like a roller coaster, instead of steering the vehicle in an open world feeling. We face some technical challenges, and first of it is that we found out that in Steam VR we cannot use more than 2 trackers nor 2 controllers to control the game. And our given prompt is to build a multiplayer game which is more than 3 people. So we adjust our gameplay to fit the technical challenges. Secondly, we do not have a 3D artist, so we made all the things through the packages from the Unreal Store. Thirdly, the frame rate of the technical demo in both Unreal and Unity is about 40 frames per second. So we do a lot to optimize the performance. This is how we adjust our gameplay and the development through the technical challenges.
So here's some adjustments we have throughout our
development progress. So initially, we want all the players to have the same interaction time. So first of all, in the first level, we want all of them to have interact with organisms, such as collecting fish with lasers. And then in the second level, we want all of them to be able to shoot enemies. But then due to limitation of vibe trackers and inputs, we did change our design. So we have like laser interactions of cleaning coral in the first level, and then having 2 players being able to shoot, and the third player being able to use a flashlight to stun enemies throughout the second level. So during playtest day, we have 48 official playtesters giving us survey feedback. We have over 100 people experiencing the cavern and giving us feedback on like our entire environment and then like game experience. So some problems we did encounter were some like motion sickness, but we did have motion sickness with some game design, making the movement slower. There were some aiming offsets. That's due to a rendering problem, which we'll talk about later in the slides. Another thing is some people think the UI and audio hints weren't obvious enough, so they weren't kind of confused on what to do. So talking about the rendering problem, so how we render the cavern is we start render from the camera view and then render everything from the camera's perspective. What we should do to fix it is render everything that's behind the cavern, so then the offset problem will also be fixed. And then due to the offset problem, we did add in like a mini sub to help player with aiming, so it feels like they're controlling the drone instead of like aiming in real space with the guns.
Then I will talk about the UI design. Due to our game setting, the player needs to stay at submarine all the time, and the submarine is automatically moving forward. And the player needs to use the drone outside the submarine to shoot, and they can control moving. So we decided to bring visual ambience to the player through UI. First of all, we use the UI on the side to imitate the submarine online frame, and like the submarine window and the submarine control panel, and that subconsciously make the player feel like they're in the submarine. And for the UI on top, we use the UI to imitate the submarine display, and that remind the player there's a screen in front of them, and make the drone shooting more immersive. And for the level 1 UI, the player will see the instruction at the beginning scene. It will show the player how to use the tracker to shoot. And when they enter the first level, the UI on top will show the total number of the clean coral and also the number of the different type of clean coral. And the UI on the side will also show the total number of the clean coral, and that allows the player to see the information when they are looking at the side screen. And for the level 2 UI, the player will see the instruction after the transition of the level 1, level 2, and it will show the different function of the tracker. And when they enter the level 2, and the top UI and the side UI will all show the number of the robots they defeated.
All right, I'll talk about reflections. So during soft, we got a lot of feedback from our faculties. So the biggest one is still the aiming offset issue. Although we transitioned from a first-person shooting experience to a mini-sub drone shooting experience, which we indicate the players are controlling a drone to shoot. The controller we are using is shaped like a gun, which kind of indicate players to use it as a gun. So that was our biggest issue. Some other issues, such as context audio, transition from first level to second level was not smooth enough. And also the feedback system, we need a better feedback system to let the players know what they're doing. So after soft, we did some update with our transition, and we made some audio UI updates during the first and second level to guide the player better and let them know what they're doing. We also made new visual effects when the enemies are being hit, so that players understand better what they're doing. We add elements of stage 2 to the end of stage 1 to indicate to have a smoother transition. We also created a 20-plus page document on how to develop in the cavern and how to set everything up. We want to make it easier for the developers developing in cavern later, and we added to the ETC archive. So some potential adjustment that can be made. Custom controller, although we mentioned that SteamVR doesn't support more than 2 player inputs, we can probably combine other inputs such as wireless keyboard or mouse to make a custom controller, and we will break the indication that players are using a gun to shoot. We also want to adjust the POV. As Patrick mentioned, we want to redo the rendering process so that some of the issues that we have will not exist. We also want to make more asymmetric components for players and add quadrophonic sound. Some insights, we underestimate the controller's impact on players, so we should probably focus more on the controller's impact. The controller's shape will kind of indicate how players will use it. Secondly, players' attention is very different since we're designing on a 270-degree screen, which is very different than the PC screen. We want to spread interactive objects all along the screen. And it's very different than VR because the cavern screen is not following the player's view. We also learned a lot about how to create immersion with audio and UI. So these are, some of these serve as ambience, and some of them can really affect players' emotion. So to summarize, well, we're Team Cavern, and we designed a multiplayer experience for the Cavern, and we are open for questions. Thank you.
During your play testing, did you test with any groups that were families? So a kid and a parent, or kids and a parent?
Yep. There are definitely a lot of families and couples that were there, and I think a lot of them were really impressed and immersing experience.
For those groups, did you choose to give the flashlight control to the parent, or was that not mentioned? Just thinking about the asymmetric gameplay that you guys set up, and like what kind of testing data you got from that.
We didn't really choose to give the flashlight mechanic to anyone, but it was kind of voluntary, on a voluntary basis. But I think we found that all the players were really enjoying the process, and especially when they're having the flashlight, they communicate more with each other, because it was kind of the asymmetric component that pushed them to really collaborate and communicate.
Given the choice, would you choose to develop something else on a system like this? That's a trick question.
Yeah, I think at this moment we have a really solid base for developing in Cavern. So when we first got in Cavern, we need to really set things up. We need to make the ODS systems and transfer everything into Unreal, which is really new. And we had really spent a lot of time developing those and really fixing technical issues. And I think after that, designing for Cavern and working on Cavern is a really interesting process. So it's it's very challenging to design over the technical requirements, technical issues and the limits of Cavern. But after you design around those elements, it's also very impressive how immersive the Cavern space is, and really enjoyed seeing playtesters really shocked by how much depth of view they can get and how immersive the space really is.